We're back on the gate project. We're going to continue on the scroll work, but in the meantime, there is something more pressing we have to get done. The landscape contractor is going to be the one setting the pillars in concrete, so that's these guys here. And I'd like to get those done and on site as soon as possible. He's not going to be able to get onto it for a few weeks still, but I'd really like it out of my way, out of my shop. And it's convenient. I'll have a trailer accessible to be able to transport those this week. Because I'm going on Saturday to pick up a new toy. We'll probably do a little separate video on that whole trip. But so right now I've got to get these I-beams that reach into this pillar. This is a 10-inch structural square tube. It's hollow, 3/8 wall. So the idea is that will be set into concrete, 5 or 6 foot into the ground, and they'll stick 5 or 6 foot up out of the ground. And this I-beam will have its profile cut out of the structural tube and pass all the way through and get welded on both ends. So it's going to be absolutely, positively solid. So the first step we've got to do is we've got to get this 4-inch standard I-beam cut. It's about 3 foot lengths, need 4 of them. Then once those have been cut and cooled down and cleaned up, we'll cut the profile out of the square structural tube that I-beam will then pass through and I'll get welded up. Now it's important that I get these I-beams parallel and square to the structural square tube inside the pillar when we put it together. I've got a lot of room for adjustment and fixing of error when it comes to mounting the hinges on the outside, but I want to do as little of that as possible. On top of that, I want to give good, solid reference points for the people that are going to be installing this in the concrete. It's important that each of these mounts are relatively level, right? That way when we mount the gate, then it's going to be much easier to get each of our end over here in line, right? You don't want one side lower than the other. You don't want it all cockeyed. Now I've got a lot of adjustment in the way my hinges are made, but again, we're trying to shoot for as close as possible. That way our adjustments are minimal. So that's the plan. We'll get those cut out. We'll cut our profile out of the structural square tube and we'll get it all welded up. And once that's together, which will probably be maybe end of day today, maybe Thursday, then we'll move right on back to the scroll work. I've got a couple tools I've got to make, some bending forks and some tongs that are almost done before we can continue on with the scrolls. But it's coming together. I'm cutting the I-beam now that are going to be the mount points for my hinges. They're going to attach to the big square structural tube that are going down inside of pillars, anchored into concrete in the ground. And I'm just set up. I've already cut one, and I'm torch cutting about 3 foot lengths of this. I need 4 total. I've got 1 cut, so I need to cut 3 more. So I'll just get it pulled out here, measured, marked, and get to cutting. You have to forgive me for the background noise. There's an active parking lot over there and a compressor over there making noise. But we've got the I-beam cut, and now we're cutting the profile out of our 10-inch square structural tube. So we're going to cut the I-beam profile out on this side and on the back side so that the I-beam can pass all the way through and get welded fully on both sides. So these are going to be the top hinge mounts, and then 4 foot and change down there, it'll be the next ones. So I've got this little slice of I-beam here that I'm using my profile, so I get it located, and I actually spray paint around it to give me a line to follow, and I just cut on the outside of that line, trying to get it as close as I can. And I can actually torch in some bevel to prep for some weld, but I'm not super worried about that. It's going to have multiple passes all the way around it. With or without that bevel, it would be perfectly strong. But yeah, I'm gonna get to marking this out. It takes a little bit to get it laid out, so there'll be a lot of, probably some time lapse sped up here. But yeah, we'll get this torch cut out and then we'll probably get prepped to weld. I don't know if I'm gonna weld today, it's gonna depend on time, but we're gonna get pretty close.
Once the profiles were cut out of that square beam, you can see here I'm just cleaning up the I-beam, prepping for weld. Now it takes me a little bit to figure out my process of lining them up, getting them square, and all that figured out, but I get a process down and get them both knocked out and welded up. In this clip you can only see me getting one side done, but this other side is exactly the same, just a little bit quicker. I did mainly stick welding. You can see my big Ideal Arc welder there sticking to the door. I'll move it out a little closer here in a bit. I did a lot of stick welding with it. It did really well, and I did a little bit of MIG welding, but took a little longer than I anticipated. Took about a full day to get all this together and welded up as cleanly as I liked, but we got it done.
All right, this isn't the best week for video, but we've got a lot checked off the list there for the gate project. I've got my pillars here welded up. Everything's close enough. The majority of that I-beam is going to get trimmed back, but it's going to stay there until it gets put in the ground and then stone pillars stacked around it. Now, I am by no means a certified welder, but this is so overbuilt, and the welds are honestly perfectly fine. I stick welded most of it, MIG welded the back in some places, just because I couldn't get these up and turned over, and I'm not going to try overhead stick welding 6 inches off the ground. So I'm really pleased with how it turned out. Hopefully get these over on site next week. Tomorrow is Friday, so we'll do a little bit in the shop in the morning, and most of the day is going to be spent getting the truck, getting the trailer, and getting ready to go pick up our new shop acquisition, which that'll probably be a separate video. But yeah, I'm really pleased so far. We'll pick up next probably in the forge, working on some scroll work now that this is done. I'd like to show off a couple tools that I made. These are side projects in the whole gate project for scrolling. I found that when I was going to set my scrolls in my scrolling jig, I was having a hard time holding on. Now, oftentimes you can set this scroll by hand, which is what I did at the anvil with the hammer and the horn. And then you cool the tip of this off, and that acts as a hook. You can come here and grab, and then you continue on your scroll. But I found that I just wasn't getting the grab I wanted, nor was I getting the profile I wanted by doing that. So, next best thing is a set of vice grips, you know those vice grips that would just grab right here and hold it for you. I don't love vice grips. They leave a bit of a mark. They're not smooth jaws. You could grind the jaw smooth, fine. But also, vice grips aren't my favorite. So I came up with this pair of tongs. It's almost like a pair of bending forks, but they actually lock. And so now I've got a pretty decent hold. I will never have to put this much force on it, because when I do this, it'll be hot, and it'll be very easily come around. You just got to grab it and hold it like really very lightly. Now the other tools I made 2 of these, just set of bending forks, very simple, very basic. This will be for reaching over, tweaking, holding. It's just invaluable when you're doing scroll work. You need a number of these. I've got some short ones here. These aren't great because they're not super tall. This one's fine. I like having a longer tongue on one side in case you need to reach down and grab like a fence that's not the full height of your material. Kind of like this scrolling jig. The scrolling jig's only like 1 inch and change wide. This scroll here is a full 2 inches wide, so that's nice. But you need all sorts of depths and thicknesses and lengths and strengths. These are obviously light duty because they're very short and not very heavy handled. In a previous video, I showed you a really long one made out of pipe for doing the big 1/2 inch flat. You really needed the leverage for those. But anyway, so I made those. But this guy, I'm really kind of pleased with how it came out. It's a, if you can see there, you got a sawtooth design, and I ground a profile in there, and it just clicks in place. And it's real simple, not very difficult. I mean, it's a pair of flat jaws. You don't flatten your jaws, you just round them, and you just turn over one of your reins. In fact, I might be incorporating this as opposed to a tong clip for some other tong designs I use. Now, the only issue with this is it's not the easiest to get undone, okay? On top of that, I imagine you could really pinch yourself like crazy with this. So for me, it's gonna work out fine. I don't think I would make something like this and sell it, but I'm very pleased with how it turned out, especially for the use case. You know, the other problem with vice grips, you know, I was talking about coming in here and grabbing this. Vice grips, your hand's down here. This flat bar, believe it or not, even though it's thin, it radiates a ton of heat. When you're talking about heat radiant from a material, the cross section and mass does not matter as much as the surface area does. The more surface area you have that is hot, the more that's radiating heat. Okay, the more surface area it has to conduct that heat into the air, right? And so if your hands are down here, you've got to have gloves on. You have to have gloves on. But I don't, if I can help it, I don't wear gloves. For a number of reasons. For one, they get caught in things, get dangerous, they get hot, they can burn you, and they don't give you much feedback. You lose a lot of tactile feel, and it's hard to tell when things start to get hot. You don't know that we're warm yet. But anyway, not to get off on a tangent, but I was really pleased with how these tongs came out. So next time we get to filming and doing some of the scroll work, you're going to see these in just about every single shot.
Okay, here we go. We're finally making our first scroll. We start off with a small one here. Now, this is where you really learn your process. Every single job is different. Every single scroll is different. Even though you may make 1,000 scrolls in your time, none of them are going to be exactly the same. So here we very quickly found out that either the steel was too cold or the bending forks that I made were a little too light duty. That's okay. They're still good bending forks. We'll just make a heavier duty set, or we'll get our steel a little bit hotter. But we're refining the process, right? This is the very first one. We know what we want. And now we need to find out the most efficient way to get there with the tooling that we have, or what tooling we can make to make it go faster. So once I get this one made out and find the rough spots, the scroll and tongs, heat, all those kinds of things, then we're going to come back and refine that and make it quicker. And hopefully we can do it in a way that it's efficient. We don't waste a ton of time making a bunch of tools, when in reality we should be making the actual piece, whatever we're making, in this case scroll work. Yeah, so after it comes out of that jig there, I wasn't 100% happy with the profile, so I just took it to the anvil, cleaned it up a little, and you'll see how it turned out right here in just a second.
All right, that's the end of the week. We got a lot done, a lot of boxes ticked off the list for the big gate project. Got the pillars done. They are ready to be delivered. They didn't get delivered today. It's Friday now. I was hoping they would go today, but we had no way to unload. Their tractor on site was down. It should be fixed this weekend, so we're going to be good to go come Monday. Hopefully I'll still have the trailer for Monday. I have to check on that. If not, I do have other options. It's just not as convenient. So we'll get those delivered on Monday and get those out of the front of the shop. I'm leaving tomorrow to go get a toy for the shop, or at least a new acquisition. I can call it a toy, but really it's a much needed piece of machinery. That'll be a separate video. But I'm really happy. We got some progress on the scroll work. We got a couple of scrolls done, not a lot, but we are ready now, I think, to really get in the swing of it. I might make a couple more bending forks. The two I made are really small. I think they're just way undersized for this big 2-inch material. They'd be great if we were, scrolling inch and a half material. But they're undersized. I could harden and temper them because they are out of 40-140. I don't think it's worth it. I think I'd rather have them bend than break. But yeah, that's it's all coming together. Next week should be maybe a little bit of driving Monday, Tuesday, getting those pillars dropped off. But I'm hoping end of week next week we'll have one of these scroll panels together and potentially dressed. The only thing that's stopping us from having them dressed is it really use die grinders. and I use all pneumatic die grinders for the most part. And my air compressor is not 100% right now. I have to get a new motor contactor for it. It has burned up, and so I'm ordering that hopefully today, maybe tomorrow. And once that comes in, we'll throw it in there, then we can really do our dressing with our die grinders. But until then, we can get our panels together, welded up, and rough dressed with an angle grinder where it's accessible. But for the most part, most of that's going to be done with the die grinder. But we have 2 of these panels to make. And once they're made and out of the way, we might go ahead and make the small panels. The wings have basically a 75 or 80% size of the same panel. It's pretty much exactly the same. I don't know, I'm thinking logistics. I don't know if it's worth it for me to jump straight into that. Because I'm thinking the gate panels are gonna get done first, even though I'm gonna forge and texture all the material for the gate and the wing fence panels at the same time, because they're pretty much the same. But I'm gonna assemble the gates in here, and they're probably gonna end up outside for wire wheeling, finished wire wheeling and painting. There might be a weekend or a week that we end up building a lean-to to help facilitate that, so we get it out of the rain, out of weather, and give us a little more space in the shop. Especially with this new acquisition, we're going to need some more space. But I don't want to do anything too incredibly permanent because we're very likely not going to be here for forever, right? But no, I'm really pleased with the progress we got done. It's moving along. Tooling's getting built. See you guys next week.